Hi, Leroy. Hi, Parker.
Good morning.
How's life?
Very busy last week because class are ending and papers and finals.
Aren't you glad that you don't have to do anything else for this class?
Yeah,
What about you, Parker? How's life? Hmm. Yeah, well, hold on. This is the beginning of the end. We'll we'll get through this. You heard the news that the UK administration has started vaccinating the Brits. So we will be soon in the same position. Hi, Denise. How are you?
I'm good, Professor. How about you?
Ready to finish the semester.
Ah, me too.
Are you taking any classes during the winter intersession?
I think I need a break. I'm not taking a semester.
Oh boy, I was supposed to go to Germany to teach in my usual master's program, but of course Germany is closed too. So I'm gonna have another Zoom class in January. Yay!
Good
Exciting.
morning.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm good.
You good? Any news on your front?
Nothing. Just chilling.
So Parker is stressed and you chilling. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, last 2 weeks, so just trying to get the assignments in. You know.
Right. And there is, of course, more, right? You still have to do other assignments for other classes.
Yeah, it's not that. It's not a lot of assignments, but still, like, you gotta finish it. No,
Good.
it's like 2 more weeks left. So
And then the vacation. Are you taking any classes during the
I
winter
was actually going to
session?
take a winter class, but now I'm not. I like moved that class to like spring, so So I got no class on winter.
Perfect. So you're going to get a little bit of a break in January. Yay.
Yeah.
How about you, Brandon? How's life with you?
It's going pretty good. Almost done with everything. I think I should be done by next Monday.
Oh,
'Cause I have like 2 tests Monday.
and that's it?
Yep.
Wow. What about winter intercession? Are you taking anything or are you chilling
Nah,
out?
I'm chilling. Not taking anything.
You guys are stressed out. What can you do? Well, the good news is on the horizon. Hopefully, they will start inoculation in December. Of course, it's not going to be applicable to you for a while because it's going to be other people, but maybe by the summer. Are you guys going to get vaccinated? What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know if anytime soon. Probably gonna take long since like we're probably gonna get vaccinated because like all of the vaccine has to go to the frontline workers first, and then
Right, right.
it's just getting started. So
But when it's available, will you do it?
I think hopefully I guess because I never got sick. It's been
Hmm.
like a whole year since I got sick, and that's very good.
Yeah.
I've been taking vitamins and all that stuff, bro.
Good for you, Justin. Vitamin C. Yay. Leroy, what are we going to say?
I will definitely do it. I'm pretty high risk. I have a lot of health problems. I'm diabetic and I don't really believe too much in all the conspiracy theories.
Right. I think one of the reasons one should consider that is not because perhaps of yourselves, except for uh, Leroy, who has all these conditions. You guys are all young, but you have your parents and your grandparents and everybody else, maybe because of them. Okay, great. So this is what I have on tap for us. If you guys don't mind, I want to maybe talk a little bit about the conclusions to this class because I think that makes sense to bring it all together. And then I'll be happy to continue to chat if you have time and desire to do so. Maybe you have some questions, could be practical questions, what to take next, maybe some ideas about your future, or just in general. This is our last class, so we can do whatever we want. In terms of my finishing up with the classes, I still have to grade your final blogs from Thanksgiving until now. I got, let's see, checking my list. I've got 15 peer evaluation forms, which gives me probably enough information. I haven't taken out the 2 lowest grades out of your quizzes yet. I hope to do all of that today and tomorrow. So, and grading today and tomorrow for the blogs. So what will be left for me is your lab 3. Yes, Denise, go ahead.
Professor, did you receive my email?
Yes, Denise,
Oh,
I have you, and
okay.
I have a bunch of other people that I need to. That's why I'm saying that I will be checking the blogs and adjusting them based on your feedback. For those of you who sent me something, not everybody did, but those who did. So I hope to do all of that, let's say, in the next couple of days, and hopefully by Monday, right? I will have full grades. That is, I will have your lab 3 graded as well. Everything will be posted, and on Monday, probably I will be able to calculate your grade, but you can do it yourselves. Once you know the points, there's no mystery. Okay, so let's do our last sort of discussion of the material. Okay, where are we? It's often the case that we sort of run out of time in our regular class and just leave it as is, wherever we finished. And as you know, we started doing chapter 12, but it was more of a thinking around decision making and reasoning and less so of the academic content, because I thought we don't need to be so strict about our last chapter. Now, what I would like to do is to perhaps remind you what psychology is all about and why cognitive psychology is important, and perhaps that will help you in your continuation of psychological education when you take other classes. Some of you, I think, still have plenty, a few semesters ahead of you. And that makes more sense to understand each class not as a sort of separate field by itself, but as something that belongs to this wider, very diverse area of psychology. That's why I want to have my last 40, 45 minutes, whatever, to bring it all together, hopefully. Has anybody been to Greece?
Nope.
No.
But I'd
No.
love to. I mean, why not?
Well, it's hopefully that the day will come when you will be able to travel. But in general, the reason why I ask you about Greece is because I want to start that far in a minute. But our general idea behind psychology, and I think that's why it's so popular with students and general public in general, is because it gives us potential answers to these two questions. Where do we come from? And why? What are we? Why are we here on this earth? And perhaps maybe the most important one is, where are we going? I don't think it has been more urgent than this year. In 2020, we are all asking this question. Whether it's more practical one, are we asking it because of COVID pandemic, or are we asking it in general? What's going to happen once we conquer this disease? But there will be others. What is the lesson for the humanity? And as you know, and I am a fan of art, so I've been showing you a bunch of paintings, especially in the beginning of the class. Here's another one. Anybody who ever goes to Boston, whenever you go to Boston, it's actually has been snowing in Boston this weekend, because my daughter is a graduate student at MIT, so she tells me that it's been like 6 inches, not in Boston itself, but sort of around Boston. So they have this wonderful Museum of Fine Arts, and one of the Paul Gauguin's paintings is there. So next time you head to Boston, plan a visit to, or actually do a virtual visit, which you can do now. Anyway, going back to Greece. As you know, Greece is kind of an interesting country. It has a bunch of islands, and it has a couple of peninsula areas. And there is one particular middle section of Greece called Penipolises, or whatever they pronounce it in Greek. And there is a famous ancient Greek town of Delphi. Maybe some of you have heard about that. And in Delphi's, and I've been there, I was there in August. It was excruciatingly hot. It was 114 degrees. Oh. So what's left there is a few ruins, and one of them is a temple of Apollo. And it's sort of like the Mount of Parnassus is right there. You can see on that slide a little bit of a mountain going up, the slope going up. And the reason why I want to start with the Temple of Apollo and Delphi is because this is the cradle of all Western tradition. So there at the bottom of this, what's left of the temple, there is one of the most famous inscriptions that sort of directs us in our Western tradition of civilization, and that is "Know thyself." Now, of course, it's in Greek. There's also another one, maybe less famous, but also important, "Nothing in excess." So starting with "Know thyself," this is where we start thinking about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and then going up to modern times. So this inscription, "Know thyself," is attributed to 7 sages. These were the Greek philosophers of that time, 6th and 7th century before Christ. So one of them was Solon, who was the father of the humane laws, who proposed that the ancient Greeks should abandon the draconian laws that were in place at this time. Now, interestingly, this temple of Apollo, was the seat of an oracle, Delphi oracle. It actually was a woman, a priestess, and she was the one who was the most powerful oracle in the entire ancient Greek. And so she was revered as the most knowledgeable human being who communicated with gods. She actually proclaimed Socrates to be the wisest of men. So what's interesting then, if we move to Socrates and the way, as you know, most of his teachings are not from his own writing, but from writing of Plato. Here in New York, actually, we can go to Metropolitan Museum of Art to see David's famous painting of the death of Socrates. He was ordered to die by drinking hemlock. Hemlock is one of those extremely poisonous plants. Every part of that plant is poisonous. Even if an animal eats hemlock and then human consumes that animal's flesh, a human can die from this. So what is known about the last days of Socrates, and in particular the day of his death, is written in Plato's Apology. And here comes another important maxim of our Western civilization, that the unexamined life is not worth living. And that's what psychology does. It helps us examine our life and improve it in for ourselves and for people who are around us. Now, I want to skip a few centuries and move on directly to the earlier precursors of cognitive psychology for us that we talked about during our second class on biological basis of cognition, and that is René Descartes, a French philosopher from the 17th century. What was interesting about Descartes, obviously, because he was born and educated in the beginning of the 17th century, that he basically rejected, as he grew up, everything that he was taught by church and by school. And these were the types of education people could get at those times. And he resolved to achieve sort of human knowledge for himself only by the application of human reason alone. Okay, so he started by saying that he doubted everything, that nothing was real, everything was fake, if we would say today, right? Except his own existence. That, he said, is not possible to reject. So what is ascribed to him is another well-known, maybe famous saying, cogito ergo sum, which is in Latin, I think, therefore I am. So to think is to exist. And that was Descartes' conclusion of his examination of life. So by saying that we humans are things that think, he kind of initiated this modern tradition of philosophy from which our modern psychology evolved. Therefore, so he's almost like a father to the modern psychology that we know today, especially cognitive psychology. So now we think of psychology as a full participation science, or full participant science in this tradition of Western thought, because it attempts to answer many questions. These are just a few that are related to cognitive psychology, the one branch that we studied during this semester. So in the beginning, I talked to you about the trilogy of mind, that is knowledge, feelings, and desire. And in this particular class, we focused on knowledge. So what is the nature of knowledge? Well, you can now have a nice answer to this question, because we talked about perception, attention, memory, language, imagery, concepts, decision making, problem solving. You can also now attempt to answer a question of how does the mind work? I mean, this is a huge one. It's not just the job of psychology to do so, but the job of biology and neuroscience and many other disciplines. In the framework of cognitive psychology, we wanted to think about how our minds tackle problems. I mean, how do we solve them? How do we create new concepts that come as a reflection of new things, new objects that we invent? There's also a social component of which I spoke just a little bit because I don't really have time for this. How do we negotiate our relations with other people, which is more of a uh, Psych 212, Psych 226 subject matter, social psychology and personality. And again, we cannot ignore the question of how the mind related to the body, especially from the point of view of psychopathology, of so many students seem to think is what all psychology is about. So we have all these interesting questions that psychology allows us to contemplate and answer. So moving on from Descartes to the 18th century, we come to German philosopher Immanuel Kant. He's the one who's responsible for this trilogy of mind that I mentioned. Now, it was interesting that Kant, being a philosopher, didn't really think of psychology as being a science, because for him, science was based on measurement, and the mind is material, right? The brain is material, but the mind is not. So it cannot be measured. So he kind of denied psychology as a scientific enterprise. But just 80 years later, we see Ernst Weber and Gustav Fechner. These are the German scientists who brought together the laws of natural world, physics in particular, and the laws of human psychology, creating a subfield of psychophysics. So there, they basically asked people, the participants, to assign a number to the intensity of the sensory experiences, giving us the first laws of psychophysics. Just at the same time, maybe a little later, Hermann von Helmholtz, that's another German scientist, began his experiments in the perception of distance and depth. And Franciscus Donders, whose experiment I hope you remember from the beginning, simple versus choice reaction time. If you see a yellow smiley face, raise your hand. If you see a yellow smiley face and a red smiley face, raise your left hand for yellow, raise your right hand for red. This is our chapter 1. So Donders was the first one to actually design an experimental measure that could give us some understanding of what happens in the human mind. And remember, it's all by inference, because we don't have any direct observation of how human mind works. Well, if you have some kind of a surgery on the brain, but that doesn't tell you what goes on. Now, of course, we start the actual count of the birth of psychology from Leipzig, which is a German town not far from Berlin, where Wilhelm Wundt started his first laboratory where he conducted studies. I won't call them experiments. Many of his studies were introspection studies. Remember a white sheet of paper that you're supposed to describe using methods of introspection. So Wundt is considered to be the first real psychologist, just 100 years after Kant proclaimed psychology is not being a science. Now, for Wundt, of course, psychology was limited. It was limited to the immediate experience, that is, perception, sensation. Anything that was above that, what we call higher mental processes, such as thought, memory, language were not susceptible to experimental investigation. That's why he only did perception, sensation studies. Interestingly, if we think about what we know from what followed, we can say that somebody like Hermann Ebbinghaus would actually represent a psychologist who studied these higher mental processes. Now, Hermann Ebbinghaus, perhaps, again, a name you should remember, is the German psychologist who wrote his dissertation after studying his memory using multiple lists of nonsense syllables. And he came up with the forgetting curve by Ebbinghaus that we mentioned several times before when we studied memory. So in particular, Ebbinghaus showed that you lose your memory of the information that you just learned within the 30, 40 minutes to an hour. You lose 30 to 40% of what you just learned, and you continue to lose in the next few days until you're sort of at plateau of 20%. Therefore, he had this idea that if you distribute your practice by trying to recall the material that is important for you to remember on a regular basis, that you should be able to retain much more than just 20%. So one of the applications for studying is that cramming before the exams only works for one day. And that's not a very useful way to spend your time, especially if some particular knowledge is going to be important in your life. Francis Galton, as a person, a psychologist, we would call him now, but not in those days, cousin of Charles Darwin, is famous for three things that we discussed in this class. Well, phrenology, which is a pseudoscience, but there is something to be said about how the function and the localization of function in the brain, how they can be studied. That's another work by Francis Galton. He's also somebody whom we talked about when we did the vividness of imagery questionnaire. That's Galton's work. And finally, we talked about Galton last week when we talked about intelligence, because one of the uh, lines of research that he pursued was individual differences in intelligence. Again, so all these people demonstrated that psychology is a science because they're using scientific method, right? And just to mention Ivan Pavlov, Russian physiologist, and Edward Thorndike, an American psychologist, who applied a lot of this higher mental functions to study learning in animals. We didn't spend too much time on learning, just again, because it's a short course. But this is trilogy of mind, so it's not just cognition that matters. That's what we studied in this class. But if we go beyond that, we go to feelings and desires, we're going to get to other sort of branches of trilogy of mind, emotion and motivation. And we can also continue to look at how cognitive psychology studies interaction of humans and groups, which would be social psychology, and how the mind breaks under pressure in psychopathology. So, coming back to the beginning, the most important subject in our life is ourselves. Of course, we always want to know who we are, why we are, and whatever bothers us. So, what does psychology tell us about ourselves? Right? That's where we're heading to now. So there are several sort of lessons that come from the short life of psychology as a science. Now, considering 1890, it's about 140 years old, right? It has made, of course, huge progress in 140 years. especially in understanding our cognitive processes, but also emotional and motivational. We have learned quite a lot about biological substrates. That's where neuroscience comes in. And we are learning more and more about how psychology affects social and cultural institutions and context in which we as individuals live. So, in the short life, right, we have learned quite a few important things about mental life, because that's what psychology is. Psychology is a study of mental life. And in some cases, from this class, we know quite a lot about visual perception, certain types of memory, maybe language processing and categorization. But there's also quite a few important things that we've learned in the history of psychology about ourselves. So there are three lessons. The first one is that mind matters. Human behavior is intelligent. That is, it goes beyond reflexes. It goes beyond conditioned responses and instincts. We do not simply respond automatically to our environment. We sort of believe and behave in accordance with our internal mental representations. In the beginning, I mentioned that there are two major characteristics of cognitive psychology. One has to do with mental representations. That is, we infer certain components of cognition, let's say a memory trace, engram in Lashley's terminology. What is it? Um, and information processing approach. So mental representations are important because they are the ones that guide our behavior. Uh, So our actions, if you think about your own life, are based on our perceptions of the present. What do we see? Um, they also are influenced by our memories of the past. Have we been exposed to this particular environmental stimulus before? But what's more important and helps us to direct our thinking and expectations of the future. Okay. But of course, like I said, there is also uh, not only cognition in our mind, but also feelings and desires. So the other branches of psychology are concerned with the other two parts of feelings and desires. Again, when you go and take any other class, maybe some of you already are thinking of higher level electives, think of the place in the general field of psychology in general. Again, this is the trilogy of mind proposed by Immanuel Kant: knowledge, feeling, and desire. And psychology in general must understand and study all three. The other lesson that is, or theme that comes out of the study of psychology, is the theme of interaction. That is, the mutual influence among causal elements as they combine to produce an outcome. So interactions, if we think about cognition, the cognitive psychology, occur at many levels. So when you learn, again, not that we spent a lot of time on classical and operational conditioning, it's all about prediction and control. If you're a rat that is being conditioned to administer some drug, the rat will learn to push that pedal because it can control the outcome. When we talked about sensation and perception, we had to think about how we judge this particular distal object before it becomes proximal object during the transduction process. Right? We also thought about perception as constructive problem solving, especially in the framework of Jerome Bruner, where you knowing about your previous experience will help you to decide whether this new object is something that you need to considered dangerous, for example. Or if you're looking at an ambiguous stimulus, let's say it's a rat man or whale kangaroo, ambiguous figure, whether you see it as a whale or as a kangaroo may depend not only on your previous experience with these animals, but also with the fact that you may be more familiar with kangaroos than whales if you live in Australia. When we looked at memory, we looked at memory also being more like a reconstructive problem solving, because memory, although it was considered to be almost like uh, well, in those days they didn't have tape recorders or camcorders, but something that was recorded as is, to the knowledge that was produced by Bartlett, who showed that we reconstruct much more than we remember. And you guys did a little exercise based on Bartlett's work and the War of Ghosts, where people omit a lot of details, but they also commit. They introduce a lot of other details that were not a part of the story. And that's, again, the problem solving. And finally, we talked about judgments under uncertainty last week, when uh, people are pressed for making a decision or, you know, acting out on something. They would go with heuristics as opposed to lengthy labor consuming algorithms. So all of that shows how these parts of cognition interact with each other. But of course, it's not just cognition. Cognition interacts with emotion and motivation. Our feelings obviously color our percepts. Now, you can think of something as pleasant or unpleasant depending on your personal experience. And of course, many of our feelings actually are byproducts of our cognitive activity. There's also a potential interaction between the person and the situation, right? The situation can shape the person and his or her behavior. But the person obviously is a part of the environment. Now, one of the examples that I used in my very first class when I could not still meet you in person was the example of a suicide, an unfortunate tragedy that happens, how one could explain it from the point of view of knowledge, feeling, and desire, giving us interactions among these three parts of the trilogy of mind proposed by Immanuel Kant. Okay, now, so that gives us this idea that psychology is sort of dual in its nature. Think about it. It's an extremely broad science because it connects many different levels of analysis. It connects with biology, right? Um, because we have the brain as a biological substrate of mental life. It also, on the other end, right, connects with psychology, social sciences and sociology, because we live in sociocultural contexts. So our mental life is affected by uh, our evolutionary heritage and our cultural heritage. Okay. Now, so the human mind, with its capacity for thought, language, consciousness, is what brain does, right? And the human brain probably is the most important legacy of our biological evolution of our species. It's actually much more important than walking upright or having fingers as opposed to toes that allowed us to develop tools to use. We also have an incredibly large cerebral cortex with very dense neural interconnections. We talked about the numbers of neurons in the human brain, that for which we now have a much better estimate than we used to have. And it's a very powerful apparatus for general learning, for specific learning, for thinking, for problem solving, and of course, quintessential human characteristic of language, which is the highest communication system that we know of. It allows symbolic representations and flexible creative communication, which we don't get in animals. And consciousness, of course, again, something that is very important in psychology, but something to which we couldn't get because of time constraints. We do have a course on our books called Phenomenological Psychology, which is really consciousness. But we don't have anybody to teach it. I could, but there is too many other courses that have to be covered. So that's our second lesson of interaction among different components of our mental life. So in the continuation of the context of biology, so many of you are have taken or are taking courses in biology and thinking about perhaps uh, careers that are related to the sort of biological and physical basis of the mind. We also think of that cognition as sort of the product of a biological evolution, right? And I think that's interesting. You can very sharply divide sort of the universe between the dullest human, even perhaps people who have intellectual disabilities, with the smartest of chimpanzees. We studied both. We looked at how chimpanzees could acquire type of language, and we looked a little bit at the human intelligence last week. And that is what gives us our unique ability not to just to adapt to our environments, but to adapt the environment to us. And I think that is what really distinguishes us from uh, the rest of the species on this earth. Of course, our brain, that's what evolutionary psychologists tell us, is specifically geared to Homo sapiens, and that's who we are. When we started in the whatever eastern savannas of Africa in very long time ago, that brain, right, allowed us to move from these savannas to the rest of the world, including permanent villages in Antarctica, right? That brain allowed us to create clothing, to control fire, to populate the entire um, Earth, and maybe one day the moon and Mars. And all of that is without any biological differences between our brains and the brains of our forefathers. Consider Adam and Eve in that category. So evolutionary, we are still where we were in terms of the brain that many, many hundreds of millions of years ago. Our final thought, or my final thought, is that there is a little bit of a paradox of the evolution, right? What is this? Go away. That sort of biological basis, our distinct human capacity for intelligence, consciousness, and language, and it's a product of biological evolution, also creates a possibility of culture, right? And what's interesting about culture, that culture gives us this power to transcend the very biological forces that allow it to come about. So if we could, again, consider ourselves superior or different from animals, we are not only learning from sort of trial and error, and this is what animals can do as well, but we can also learn from social learning. We can do deliberate learning. We can do sponsored learning. If somebody teaches us, right, in institutions, universities, colleges like CSI. We don't have to rely on accidents, on natural selection, because we can literally make the world change around us. So think about simple situation when it's cold, like now. If we don't have the heating in the apartment, we can go out in the woods and make fire. Or we can, if there is a flood, we can build dams to control the water. If somebody breaks a leg, we can take them to the hospital and they will be fixed. And what's interesting, if there is something that we don't like, we can either try to change it, right? Or we can remove ourselves from the situation um, where we don't like being. So there are some geological terms that I use on the slide. So in the times when humans became Homo sapiens, we lived in what's known as Pleistocene era. And now we are in the Anthropocene era, which is very different. Sometimes we talk about mass communication, digital era, that would be the 21st century. Okay, so what is culture? And this is something that we could sort of finish um, our thinking of how psychology relates not only to biology on one side, but to human experience on the other side. Because it's sort of a, think of that as a set of assumptions about ourselves and about the universe that's around us. It's also a set of categories that help us understand our experience, right? We share it with a group of people and we transmit it from one generation to the next. We also record the history of previous generations, whichever way we can do that, successes and failures. And our new generations that come can learn the lessons from these previous generations. We have created these incredible cultural institutions like churches and universities and schools. We can now preserve and transmit knowledge and values beyond the many generations into the future. And we also have all kinds of, we have a structure of social rewards and punishments, right? And it results in incredible diversity of philosophy, literature, humanities, and the art. Okay, so psychology is sort of positions itself, or is positioned between these two biological and social poles by bringing them in together. It allows us to transcend the past, right? We think of what happened to us in the past, in our literature, in our art, in our philosophy again. That helps us transform the present. I guess that's something that gives us hope in today's difficult situation. We are thinking about the Spanish flu that happened almost exactly 100 years ago, and gives us hope that we can live through COVID pandemic. It also allows us to think about the future and think of how we will be able to bring it about. So finally, this is my final thought. It gives us freedom. The mind gives us freedom. Because if we use our minds, right, which we obviously should, we can change ourselves, we can better ourselves, and we can change the world around us also. Therefore, it will allow us to sort of advance into better, brighter form of life as humans. Now, if we go back to the beginning of this little excursion to the conclusions of cognitive psychology, remember Socrates saying, right, if we take it seriously, just want to remind you what it is. Right? The unexamined life is not worth living. If we take this seriously, right? Then and try to use that to attempt to understand ourselves, our mental life. Again, that's what psychology is all about. It will be possible for us to do even better work in understanding how our minds work and how we behave. So that gives us the largest task of psychology, not just cognitive psychology, but any other field, is to understand, is my last sentence, the nature of human experience, thought, action, and the role that human mind plays in human life. That's why psychology is so powerful and so exciting. So I hope you will continue your journey as psychologists in training and perhaps go beyond undergraduate education in psychology into maybe master's degree or even a PhD. Hopefully, the time that you spend at CSI is going to be useful in your career, that you're not going to stop at undergraduate degree. Many of you, especially because it's such a strong class with people who are either Verrazano, Macaulay, or at the same level of other honors programs. Okay. So what are your thoughts, guys, in general? Either about cognitive psychology, about 2020, about next semester, about... Yes, Ariel. Ari and 3 other people who did not submit your peer review. You can still do that today, but probably not beyond today. Is anybody thinking about going to a master's degree after you get your undergraduate degree?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Okay, which one, Leroy? What would be the specialty?
I don't know yet, but probably in psychology.
Well, it's broad, but is it mental health counseling? Is it school psychology? Is it maybe forensic psychology, which we have at uh, John Jay and Baruch? Uh-huh. Julia says mental health therapy. Uh-huh.
I'm thinking psychiatry.
That is medical school, Denise, right? You
Yep.
know that, right? Um, yeah, well, the you have to take MCATs. Have you tried that?
No, but I'm hoping to take it like next year around August.
Mm-hmm. To
Yeah.
see if you can do it. It's a very difficult field to get in, even medical school per se, but psychiatry within the medical field is one of the most challenging fields in terms of how many people they accept.
Yeah. It's very, very competitive.
It is very, very competitive. It's true. Hmm. How about Justin? Are you thinking of doing something after you graduate?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I'm trying to become a physical therapist. So,
Oh, fantastic. We have a great physical therapy program at CSI. In fact, it's actually a doctoral
yeah,
program. Uh-huh. That's what
mhm.
you're thinking?
Yeah, yeah. So, I want to take all the requirements, the courses in order to, go that way, which
All
leads to that
right.
way. Currently I'm actually majoring in psychology, so I will be taking two other courses next semester.
Mhm.
It's like 201 and it's like 239.
Excellent. You should have taken 201 a little earlier because that
Yeah.
would have been helpful
Wait,
for
I just
AP.
want to double check if it's 201. Hold on a sec.
Brandon, what about you? What are your plans while Justin is checking?
I'm currently undecided. I still don't know what I want to do. I have no
Uh-huh.
idea really.
So what excites you? What brings joy to you in life?
I mean, like, I guess like sports, something to do with sports, but I'm still like not sure.
Well, okay. So which sports do you find the most exciting?
Basketball,
Oh,
that's my favorite.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Your favorite. Do you play or you just
yeah. I've played since fourth grade.
fantastic? So there are, uh, you know, psychology of sports. You could continue in this direction. A lot of athletes depend on their sort of work with psychologists to help them mentalize behavior. Mhm.
So yeah, it is 201
Okay, Justin, and
with one professor. I don't know if what's your name.
I
So
know
hard to say.
everybody.
Duran Noruki, something like that. I don't know.
Yes, Valkyria.
That
Um,
one, yeah.
right. She's our most experienced faculty for research methods. So you're going to be in good shape. And now, since you know APA style, it's going to be a easy class for you. Very good.
I
Mhm.
had her last semester. She's a great professor.
Fantastic. And Amr says the same. What about you, Amr? What's in store for you next semester or in a few more years or in life?
I was trying to do physical therapy as well. I'm trying to finish up my prerequisites to hopefully apply by next year.
Oh, fantastic. Are you going to try to go to the doctoral program
Yeah,
here at CSI?
yeah. My main one is the one in Colombia, but
Uh-huh.
I'm also trying to get into this one as well because
Uh-huh.
it's still a very competitive field. So any grad school, would work.
Right. Colombia is going to be just much more expensive than
Yeah.
what you can do here. Our program is actually very good. Now nursing program is also very good. So certain fields at CSI are very competitive. I know that the nursing program, they usually take about 100 applicants. They have 100 spots, but I think there's like 600 people who apply. So it's 6 people per spot. That's huge. Interesting. Nor, what about you? What are your plans?
I'm thinking to do nursing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Okay. That's going to be another challenge, like I said, because it's about 6 people per spot.
yeah, it definitely is.
Very good. Parker, you haven't said anything. You have any plans? Oh, maybe Parker is busy doing something else. I'm looking at education, actually. Ah, I see. Interesting. Uh-huh. Which subfield of education? Elementary school. Fantastic. We really need men in that field. Absolutely. That'd be, and so we do have school psychology also. If you decide that you might be interested in continuing with psychology, we've had quite a good track record of getting CSI graduates to go to master's programs in school psychology. If anybody's interested in that, I think Brooklyn is one of them. We've had quite a few people. So if you guys, many of you are thinking about that, right? Before you graduate, consider a possibility of graduating with honors. Again, I mentioned that before. I'll mention it again right now. To do that, you need to have a GPA of 3.5 in psychology. And you should think of doing 2 independent studies back to back with the one of our faculty members in the department. And during this independent study, which is either 593, it's 3 credits, 594, that's 4 credits. And one of them actually can count toward your higher level elective in your curriculum. So you can take one independent study as an elective where you would come up with a project depending on the field. So physical therapy, who could do physical therapy? I guess people who do motor development would be good advisors for you. Sarah Berger, many of you met Sarah when you attended the first colloquium on research at our department. Lana Karasik, who is also a specialist in motor development. And these are children, but yeah, you can do other stuff. You will conduct your own little study. Hopefully, there will be a way of doing that face to face in the next academic year. Then you write an honors thesis, which is APA formatted. Now you can do it. And it's usually submitted for voting in April. And then in June, you graduate with honors in psychology. It's a very important something to show on your transcript when you apply to master's programs. Justin, you have something on your mind?
Oh no, it was so I might like I'm gonna leave right now, So
I'll
just
see.
Thursday, no class, right? This was
That's
the
it.
last one, right?
We're done,
All
Justin.
right.
I'll
So
never see you again.
I just want to say just thank you for this whole semester. You've been great. I learned a lot of stuff. So, it was a great experience, especially with the group and all, I learned a lot.
Thank you,
You're a
Justin.
good
That's
professor.
all right. If you guys,
So I have another class. That's what I'm saying. So I usually stay for an hour on Tuesdays, as you know.
I know, Justin. I'm just
So I try to come if I'm available. So I usually do come, just for an
absolutely.
hour and leave. So
So thank you for your kind words because that makes our
no,
life worth
no
living.
problem. It was yeah, it was a good semester. Hopefully, we do meet like in person. If
Absolutely, yes. Once we're back, come visit. All
hmm
right. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll email you if anything. So
absolutely.
all right.
Okay,
You have a good day.
you too,
Bye,
Justin.
everyone.
Hey, Denise, ask your question.
Oh, so Professor, since I'm going to psychiatry, um,
Mm-hmm.
um, next semester I'm taking the internship class. Do
Mm-hmm.
you still think I need to take the independent study?
Internship, Denise, is just a class. It means that you are not getting any personalized experience, really. It's it's a specialized class in, doing work, but you're not writing anything. Well, maybe you'll write a
Well,
short.
she said we're supposed to get a job in the
Mm-hmm.
career field that we
Mm-hmm.
want to go in and chaperone the doctor or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. So for my case, I will be chaperoning a psychiatrist, and I
Mm-hmm.
won't be doing desk work, but I will be working with the doctor to
Mm-hmm.
go
But
into the.
uh, well, the problem with this is, Denise, is that you uh, are not going to do anything of your own, right? You will be
Mm-hmm,
shadowing the psychiatrist, so you'll write maybe a diary of what she or he does, but it's not
mm-hmm.
something that you have designed and you have conducted. That's
Okay.
what independent study is. Independent study gives you a chance to perhaps, once you do this with this person, is to then design something that you could do. Is there an observational study that you can do with a patient, but you have to be supervised by somebody like one of my colleagues that are clinical or counseling psychologists.
Okay.
So you create your little study, you observe a patient or two, and then you write about it. So that's the difference between internship, where you just getting practical skills by observing
Mhm.
a professional, versus doing your own little, I wouldn't call it an experiment, but your own little study and then writing about it. Because that's
Okay.
what you'd be surprised once you go to this internship, Denise, how much psychiatrists write.
Mhm.
It's insane. It's an insane amount of writing. So if you don't do it yourself, you don't learn how to do it, um, it's going to be very difficult.
Okay. So I could always pick it up. I mean, I can always add it on top of the internship class
Yeah, of
since I already.
course.
So
Yes. When
I
when are you graduating?
2022.
Okay, so you've got a whole year ahead of you. So
Yeah.
once this internship is over this semester, you should consider one of the several people in my department who do counseling clinical work,
Okay.
and then approach them. Again, the easiest way to do is to look up a a bunch of professors on our departmental website,
Mhm.
and then see whose interests excite you the most. That was the question I asked Brandon. So psychiatry is a huge field. I mean, are you into substance abuse? I mean, not you personally, but are you interested in substance abuse? Are you interested in, schizophrenia? Are you interested
Mhm.
in child mental disorders? Are you interested in depression? All of these things are very, very different. So, and we have people who work on, uh, let's say, psychopathology using animal models. For example, our current chair, Dr. Dan McCloskey, has this colony of naked mole rats. And these ugly, ugly animals. They live in huge colony in success, and they run through these tubes, and then they record what these subjects do.
Mhm.
So one of the things that Dan is doing is he modeling mental diseases using animals. So
Okay.
that's also something that could be very useful, but it's from a different perspective, right? So
Right.
for you to decide who you could do your independent study with means that you need to spend some time looking at these different approaches.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Of course. So, Amar, so what's nerve wracking? The voting is, so this is how the independent study and thesis work. Once you have a draft, you have an advisor, obviously the person who coordinates and supervises your independent study, and then you have what is known as readers. These are the two other members of our faculty or our adjunct lecturers, who will read your draft, and they will write a little report saying that this draft is going to be finished, and it has all the required components. It fills in the gap. It's APA formatted and stuff like that. And that's what this voting is all about. That the three people, your advisor and the two readers, have to say that you will be able to pass. Yes, Noor, let's start with you and then get back to Denise.
Hi, Professor.
Mm-hmm.
So remember how I told you that there's four activities that I did?
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah. So it's been 2 weeks and I
I
haven't done
haven't.
any.
Yeah, you haven't, because you missed the beginning of the class where I specifically said that I haven't done any grading yet.
Oh, okay.
And I have you, as well as a bunch of other people on my
Yeah.
list. I
Mm.
will take care of this today, tomorrow, and Thursday. Thank God
Mhm.
I'm not teaching on Thursday, so I can catch up. So forgive me for not doing things a little earlier, but as you know, the end of the semester, There's just endless meetings with graduate students. It's just, oh, it's
Yeah.
bad for you, but it's bad for us as well. Ooh.
So,
Yes,
Professor,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. And
Mhm,
yesterday, well, by yesterday, I already had done all the activities.
mhm.
So, with the four, yesterday, I think I did 13 activities.
Good.
Well, two of them was 2 points, so it would count
Mhm,
as 13 points,
mhm,
and plus the 4 points, that would
mhm,
equal to 17 points. And what I have right now is 33.
mhm.
Uh, 33 points plus 17 is going to be 50.
Good,
So
good.
I officially have 50 points right now.
Yay, perfect.
Yeah,
That's what was the whole goal, is to give you a chance to
yeah.
do what you like, perhaps, or you don't dislike. So I will count and check everything in the remaining couple of days. So
All right.
because I
Thank
need
you.
to move to lab 3. Denise, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So for the independent study,
Hmm.
so when you write your senior, I don't know if it's your senior thesis, is
It's
it
called honors thesis.
honors thesis?
Hmm.
Do you get help from the supervisor,
Of
like
course.
for in the editing and everything for you?
Absolutely. Well, they don't do it for you, right?
I mean,
They
help.
they will do what I've been trying to do for you guys in your labs. That is, get together. If it is online, it is online, but
Mhm.
go through the components, help you with comments. They're not going to rewrite it for you. They're not going to go line by line and say, okay, this is, but they will give you a lot of feedback as long as you have something. So, Denise, the worst thing is when somebody comes to you and says, uh, I don't know where to begin. I haven't written anything.
Mhm.
Then your advisor will say, look, there's nothing I can do to help you unless you start doing something yourself. So that
Right.
once you have a draft, working through the draft is absolutely what the advisor will be doing, teaching
Okay.
you also how to write. That's important.
Okay. And how many pages is it?
Well, I would say it's between 20 and 30 pages on average.
Okay.
I've seen some that were maybe 15, and I've seen some that were closer to 50. A lot of that depends on the project that you will select. So if you're doing, in my lab, my independent study students usually do experiments, like the 3 experiments that you guys participated in this class. So, I mean, you wrote 5 to 6 pages, and if they're doing something that they create themselves, then there is more literature to review. So the introduction is longer. Method, of course, is longer because you have more materials, and then the results are longer. So it's like our lab reports multiplied by 3 to 4.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
Not
if you,
bad.
not bad, not totally not bad, because you have a whole year to do that too.
Mhm.
So that's fine. Yeah, I strongly advise you to, not just you, Denise, but everybody who is in this situation and who is thinking about, and if Brandon starts thinking about sports psychology too. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Julia, any thoughts on your part? And Ari, and then I see Noor maybe again.